I've made a terrible mistake. Recently I finished Ebony and Ivory props, but I recorded very little of the process. Still, I want to talk about this build and share what I learned. In the previous video I covered the assembly and how the blowback works. This time I want to cover post-processing, painting and bringing it to finished look. Once the 3D model was finalized and tested, I printed all the parts. Usually I use basic PLA filament on my Bambolab printer, but the smallest elements were printed in resin. After making sure everything fits like it should and works, I could proceed to the next step. Each gun consists of 25 parts. My main goal at this step is to sand everything and make sure that all surfaces are smooth, without any holes, bumps or defects. For PLA I use 180 grit sandpaper, for resin 400 and 800. Small imperfections are filled with the primer that I later use to cover everything. The main downside is that it takes a long time to cure fully, but when it's dry, it's a lot like a regular putty. To get into the hard to reach spaces, I printed a few sticks shaped to fit the curves. It saves time and produces better results. Sanding is the most time-consuming part in prop making for me, but somehow I've grown to even enjoy it. Despite the small size, it took a hot minute to prepare all the parts for primer, mainly due to the complex geometry. Also, I didn't want to flood everything with too thick of a layer, so I made sure that all surfaces are as smooth and perfect as I can make them beforehand. For resin parts, I didn't use filler primer. It would add too much thickness and an orange peel texture that's hard to remove from very small elements. Instead, I applied a few layers of black paint as a base. Since this paint needs a well-prepared surface, after 800 grit, I went over all resin parts with a very fine sanding sponge. Before finally applying the primer, there was one last step: to make engravings on the slides. I decided that Ebony and Ivory text will be added as a decal later, and for Tony Redgrave text had to be engraved before priming. Luckily, my friend has an X-Tool laser and we were able to fine-tune the best settings for 3D printed parts. The 0.45 mark on the barrel was done the same way. Everything was ready for filler primer, but I had to make sure that it wouldn't get inside the main parts where the blowback mechanism is. So I carefully masked all areas that shouldn't be primed. I use a two-part automotive filler primer. There are aerosol filler primers out there, but spray gun gives me much more control. The beauty of any primer is that after the first layer, all the imperfections become more visible. Scratches, steps or dips. So before the next coat, I must address them by filling with the same primer, and then spot sanding those areas with 400 grit sandpaper. After that, another 2 or 3 layers of primer. Now I have to sand this primer starting with 400 grit sandpaper. And I always sand with water. Plastic, primer or resin doesn't matter. This way I don't have to wear a respirator for hours while sanding. It's very important not to sand through the plastic, especially on flat surfaces. The difference between revealed plastic and primer will be visible after applying paint. This must be avoided. When I'm done, all the surfaces are smooth and without any imperfections. Now I have to remove the scratches left by 400 grit paper with 800 grit. The type of surface we are going for dictates how we prepare the prop. In this case, it's polished metal, so the primer must be very smooth and almost shiny by itself. To achieve that, after 800 grit, I will go over everything with a very fine sanding sponge, like with the resin parts. Ideally, there should be no visible scratches left. It's time for the base coat. I use automotive solvent-based paints. Yes, they are pretty toxic compared to water-based acrylics, but the results and ease of use are worth investing in a good respirator, which can pretty much negate all the downsides. The closest alternative product would be Tamiya or Mr. Color lacquer paints. For any bright metallic color, it's best to use black paint as a base. So right now, I need to paint all the parts black. Besides giving a uniform color for the next layer of paint, black base also fills the tiniest scratches and reveals all the imperfections, things like dust particles. And I can use a sanding sponge to touch those areas up. For ivory, I mixed three metallic shades, very bright, medium and the darker one. In the source material, the barrel and some other elements are bright and look polished. Some are darker and have a rougher finish, and the rest of the gun somewhere in the middle. I like to apply this paint in wet coats. Somehow it feels like it gives me better results. For ebony, I decided that matte clear coat over black and dry brush with silver is enough to create the effect I want. But before applying the clear coat, I must put the decals on. They were cut on the plotter from very bright gold vinyl. This particular one is very thin, so it took some material and time to dial the right settings in. After those letters were in place, I sealed them with matte clear coat. But just for ebony. For ivory though, I decided not to use any clear coat. It will dull the metallic effect of the paint, and in my experience those paints are quite durable by themselves. To paint the wooden grips, I scratched them with 300 grit sandpaper vertically to create a subtle wooden texture. Then I covered everything around them with masking tape and applied a beige color. Then darker shades of brown were painted using acrylic paints. For portraits, I printed them on self-adhesive paper and placed on separate grip inserts, which I made removable for easier and cleaner placement. The grips should be a bit glossy, so before removing the masks, I applied some varnish. The fit and finish must be checked again before final assembly. And good thing I checked, because there was one spot where primer and paint got inside and caused the trigger to jam. It was the space where the trigger bolt is moving. So I had to sand down the bolt head a little bit and add some lubricant. But now it works nicely. After gluing small parts, I threw some grime into the recesses and made the guns look slightly used. Ebony got its dry brushing and edge highlights, and ivory received some attention around the sharp edges to make them look slightly worn out. I've assembled and disassembled the guns so many times already that the final assembly was easy and fast. With fresh rubber bands and some bolts painted black, I made sure yet again that the blowback works smoothly and everything looks perfect. And this is the result. Now, a couple of thoughts when it's done. This wasn't my first build with moving parts, but it was the first this compact and using a rubber band. I definitely should try doing something more intricate. Going back to the first video, I should keep in mind that even PLA can shrink a lot on a long prints, and this affects accuracy too. Also, PLA parts slide surprisingly well against each other. Another point worth mentioning is the wooden texture on the grips. I had some help here, but I really like how it turned out, so I should remember this technique. If there is a small hole or recess where you think primer and paint won't get in, it absolutely will, so mask everything, don't be like me. And once again, I was reminded how important it is to plan the whole craft before printing and adjust the model early to simplify and improve the process. Thanks for your time and attention. I hope you found something useful in this video. If you want more of me, all the links are in the description, as well as the link for the Ebony and Ivory 3D model. I'm gonna go start a new project, and for you, I wish good luck.